rights. And speaking on principle, before I answer for you these questions, I just want to say this. I vehemently support the constitutional right to bear arms. I believe that at the end of the day, evil-minded people will find ways to either manufacture guns illegally or obtain guns illegally and use them inevitably, and if that's to be the case, then innocent people ought to have the right to defend themselves against those evil people. That's, in a nutshell, how I feel about guns. I do support criminal background checks and have a sensitivity to that nature, but I do think that there are legitimate standards in a criminal background check and illegitimate standards, specifically in terms of certain psychological questions that I think are inappropriate. And if I'll address that and more by just quickly answering for you some of these questions asked by the National Association for Gun Rights. So here are the questions that they ask, and I'm going to tell you, their questions are yes or no. I'm, however, going to offer a brief commentary after my yes or no, because to me, things are not strictly yes or no, but they're yes or no because. And unfortunately, they didn't offer a because, so I'm glad in the long run that I actually didn't have the time to fill out the survey. So question number 1. If elected, would you support legislation to implement no permit necessary constitutional carry, which would allow law-abiding citizens to carry firearms openly or concealed for self-defense without a government-issued permit? I do believe that people should have permits to carry guns because I believe there are certain people who should not carry guns. I'll give you some examples. I do not think a blind person should be able to have a license to carry a gun for the very obvious reason that that blind person can't look at the person they're defending themselves against, in theory. I also believe that criminals should not be allowed to possess guns. And people with certain psychological conditions which very explicitly indicate that they have desire to be to murder or who are very explicitly sociopathic, I do not believe they should have guns. And I think if we look at just the last few years and the people who have committed these terrible school shootings and other who've been perpetrators in other incidents, there's no question that when people with certain mental illnesses have guns in their hands, they use them and they end the lives of a lot of innocent people. So this is something I'm very sensitive to. A lot of people will say, that doesn't make you very libertarian, in that you're violating the freedom of other people. Look, my fundamental principle is protection. You can't have your individual liberty guaranteed if you're not protected. You are not protected if you're going to enable, or if you're going to make it easy, or you're not going to prevent guns from getting in the hands of people who do mean to do you harm. And that is something that we have to address. And that's a fact. The next question. If elected, would you support the passage of firearms freedom legislation, which affirms that state law supersedes federal restrictions on the in-state sale of New Jersey manufactured firearms? Here's my view on this. First of all, in regard to the conflict between what happens in a state and what happens federally, I do not believe that the federal government has any right to prohibit the freedom of the states or the citizens of particular states. So if there is a particular law that the federal government holds that violates this, then I'm going to be the first to oppose it. Now, in regard to this specific question, in regard to in-state sale of New Jersey manufactured firearms, does state law supersede federal restrictions? To me, that question is too ambiguous. What are the federal restrictions in question? And until that question is answered, I can't comment any further, because I do support certain federal regulations on the sale of guns, specifically, again, in regard to to the particulars and the specifics and the nitty-gritty of the criminal background checks that should be in place and enforced. I do believe there should be certain federal, there should be some federal legislation on that, and without having a specific, I can't comment. Question number 3. If elected, would you oppose legislation to ban .50 caliber firearms? I'm trying to read it as literally as possible. No, I do not oppose the sale or possession of any weapon whatsoever. I believe you have the right to own an automatic machine gun if you want to own it. The most powerful one, if that's something you want to own. But I do believe, again, in criminal background checks, and I believe in a particular set of standards that should exist in criminal background checks. But I absolutely do not support any ban on any particular type of gun. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's bad for self-defense. I think it's bad for individual liberty. And I think it's bad for the economy. So I absolutely oppose any legislation that would ban any type of gun whatsoever from the general public, the general law-abiding good citizen who just wants to defend himself and his family, or go out and go hunting, etc. The next question: if elected, would you support legislation to repeal the restriction on the number of firearms a law-abiding citizen can purchase over a set period of time, commonly referred to as New Jersey's one-gun-a-month law? I would absolutely repeal such a restriction. The number of guns a person owns is not the problem when it comes to the problem of gun violence in the United States of America, or anywhere whatsoever. The problem with gun violence is the mentality of the person who has possession of a particular gun. That's made clear over and over again. And another thing that's made clear over and over again is that folks that are evil are going to obtain guns because that's their prerogative. And the only way to defend ourselves against these evil people is to ensure that vigilant, responsible citizens have possession of guns. I've got to tell you, this is a very sensitive issue. So sensitive, in fact, that I've had conversations about guns with my mother. And my mother has said, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but my mother's the kind of woman who just wishes guns didn't exist. And that has a lot to do with her positions on guns. The sad fact of the matter is, weapons are always going to exist because there's always evil people out there. So if there's always going to be evil people out there who are always going to go out and pursue whatever evil weapon they can get their hands on, don't the innocent people have the right in fact, the moral obligation to defend themselves against the insane, evil folks who will do whatever they can to get their hands on the most vicious weapons they can get their hands on. Absolutely. And that's really what it comes down to. It really comes down to a self-defense issue. Here's the next question. If elected, would you support a repeal on the ban of so-called assault weapons, certain full-capacity magazines, or other types of semi-automatic firearms? Again, no, I do not support, or rather, yes, I would support a repeal of such a ban, because I do not support the ban on any type of guns. Because at the end of the day, the good guys should have the right to own guns that are more powerful than the bad guys. For the purpose of self-defense, and the purpose of self-defense is that this is a right to life issue. It's a right to life issue. You have the right to own your life, to protect your life, to preserve your life. And in the event that somebody's going to threaten that, you have the right to shoot them away with your gun, if that's what it comes down to. And I mean, it's kind of an unfortunate topic that we have to talk about, but the fact of the matter is, we have the right to live. And because we have the right to live, we therefore have the right to defend our lives. And a gun is today a tremendous way to do so. Next question. If elected, would you support legislation to allow law-abiding persons to openly carry firearms for self-defense without having to obtain a permit from the state? No, I would not I would not support legislation that would allow people to openly carry firearms without having to obtain a permit from the state. I do believe that if you want to carry a gun or to own a gun, you should fulfill a certain set of standards, and I don't believe that they should be ridiculous standards. I think that you should pass a criminal background check. You should check out really on two levels. One, you have no criminal history, or specifically a history of assault. You have no history of assault, and you have no history of being in a situation where you've told your psychologist that you're going to kill somebody, or you're going to beat the heck out of somebody. Where you've told your psychologist that you're going to go out and hurt somebody. To me, those are two things that if you're on record as being in either one of those situations, you should not have a gun. No questions asked. Why should you have a gun if you have a history of hurting people? Why should you have a gun if you've openly said you want to hurt people and are planning to pursue hurting people? Of course you should not have a gun, because you're going to use it to hurt people. This is a very obvious, self-evident position to hold in my belief. And I'm going to leave it at that tonight. I admit to you, I'm disappointed. I wanted to keep on talking. I had another survey that I didn't get to finish that I wanted to answer the questions of, but I've reached nearly the half-hour mark, and it's important that I keep these videos short because my time is precious and your time is precious. And thank you very much for your time, and I want to encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, send them to me. And I want to remind you as well to share these videos that I make with your friends, your family, and your neighbors. Get the word out. Make sure that Don DeZarn and Sean O'Connor are elected to the state legislature. And I'm going to say, may God bless the state of New Jersey, and may God bless America. And if I may briefly, I told you that I got to see Steve Lonigan tonight. I told you that I don't completely agree with every single issue that Steve Lonergan stands for. I don't agree with his stance on gay marriage. He thinks that, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but he does not, at the end of the day, support gay marriage, and he does not support the right of a woman to have an abortion. These are two things that I disagree with, unfortunately, but no politician is ever going to be perfect. Not even me. Can't figure it out, but I'm sure I'm flawed somehow politically. You gotta have that sense of humor, right? Lonergan's not perfect, but to me, he's the best option available, and I think that he's incredibly honest. I think he's bold. I think he's courageous, and he has my support and my endorsement, and I hope you will endorse him as well. Because Cory Booker just wants to spend money recklessly, destroy our economy. He has no respect for freedom and a good quality of life and protecting the lives of his fellow citizens. He's a maniac, in my opinion. So Lonergan is the better choice. And I just want to say thank you to Steve Lonergan for standing up for all of us and our freedom. And may God bless him. And again, may God bless all of you, state of New Jersey and America.